Hi everyone, welcome back to Goodnight Stories. My name is Lyra and I will be your guide into whatever book we decide to read tonight. From young readers to young adult novels, my hope is to give you a comfortable space to listen to a story while you work or doze, whatever brings you joy. So, sit back, relax, and grab a cup of tea. Tonight we jump back into Erin Hunter's Into the Wild. There's my little screen. Right. Chapter 19. Greypaw and Ravenpaw were still patching the hole when Firepaw reached them. They had left a gap just wide enough for him to squeeze back through. No luck with the garlic, Firepaw panted as he slipped in. Darkstreep's prowling around out there. Never mind, mewed Greypaw. We can get some tomorrow. I'll go and get you some poppy from Spotted Leaf, Firepaw offered. He was worried by the dull look in his friend's eyes, and the way his muscles seemed stiff with pain. No, don't worry, mewed Greypaw. I'll be fine. It's no trouble, Firepaw insisted, and before Greypaw could argue, he bounded off toward Spotted Leaf's den. She was pacing her small clearing, her eyes clouded with unhappiness. Are you okay? Firepaw asked. The spirits of StarClan are restless. I think they are trying to tell me something, she replied, flicking her tail uneasily. What can I do for you? I think Greypaw could do with some poppy seeds for his leg, Firepaw explained. His rat bites are still hurting him. The pain of losing Lionheart will make his injuries feel worse, but he'll mend in time, don't worry. In the meantime, you're right, poppy seeds will help. Spotted Leaf went into her den and brought out a dried poppy head. She placed it carefully on the ground. Just shake out one or two and give them to him, she meowed. Thanks, Firepaw mewed. Are you sure you're okay? Go and see to your friend, answered Spotted Leaf, avoiding his gaze. Firepaw picked up the poppy head between his teeth and began to walk away. Wait, Spotted Leaf hissed suddenly. Firepaw spun around expectantly and met her tawny gaze. Her eyes burned back at him. Firepaw, she hissed. StarClan spoke to me moons ago, before you joined the clan. I sense they want me to tell you this now. They said only fire can save our clan. Firepaw stared at Spotted Leaf, mystified. The strange passion faded from her eyes. Take care, Firepaw, she meowed in her normal voice and turned away. See you, Firepaw replied uncertainly. He padded back through the fern tunnel. Her strange words were echoing in his mind, but he could not make sense of them. Why had she shared them with him? Surely fire was an enemy to all those who lived in the forest. He shook his head in frustration and bounded over to the apprentice's den. Greypaw, Firepaw hissed into the ear of his sleeping friend. They'd been allowed to rest all morning after working on repairs for most of the night. Tigerclaw had ordered them to be ready to begin training at sun-high. The strong yellow light filtered through to the den told Firepaw it was already near that now. He'd had a restless night. Dreams swirled through his mind each time he fell asleep. Confusing and indistinct, but full of darkness and menace. Greypaw, Firepaw hissed again, but his friend did not stir. He'd eaten 2 of the poppy seeds before he'd slept, and now he was in a deep slumber. Are you awake, Firepaw? Ravenpaw mewed from his nest. Firepaw spat silently under his breath. He had wanted to talk to Greypaw before Ravenpaw woke. Yes, he replied. Ravenpaw sat up in his bed of moss and heather and began to wash with quick flicks of his tongue. Are you going to wake him? He asked, nodding towards Greypaw. A deep voice growled outside their den. I hope so. Training is about to start. Firepaw and Ravenpaw jumped. Greypaw, wake up! Firepaw poked his friend with one paw. Tigerclaw is waiting. Greypaw lifted his head. His eyes were still heavy with sleep. "Are you ready yet?" called Tigerclaw. Firepaw and Ravenpaw crept out of his den, blinking as they emerged into the sunlight. The deputy was sitting beside the tree stump. "Is the other one coming?" he asked. "Yes," Firepaw replied, feeling defensive on behalf of his friend. "He's only just woken up." "Training who will do him good," growled Tigerclaw. "He's grieved for long enough." Firepaw held the menacing amber gaze for a few moments, warrior and apprentice. For a heartbeat their eyes were locked as enemies. Greypaw scrambled sleepily out of the den. "Bluestar will be ready for you in a moment, Firepaw," announced Tigerclaw. The words distracted Firepaw from his anger. His first training session with Bluestar. Excitement surged through him. He had experienced his wounded mentor to be rested. He had expected his wounded mentor to be resting still. "Greypaw," continued Tigerclaw, "you can join my training session. Do you think you're up to it, Ravenpaw?" He glowered at his apprentice. "After all, you got some pretty nasty nettle stings while the rest of us were fighting those rats." Ravenpaw looked at the ground. "I'm fine," he mewed. Greypaw and Ravenpaw followed the deputy out of the camp entrance. Ravenpaw's head hung low as he disappeared through the gorse tunnel. Firepaw sat and waited for Bluestar. She did not keep him long. The Grey Queen emerged from her den and padded across the clearing. Her fur was still matted in places where her wounds were fresh, but she betrayed no pain in her confident stride. "Come," she called to him. Firepaw noticed with surprise that she was alone. Darkstripe and Longtail were nowhere to be seen. A thought occurred to him, and suddenly his excitement was tinged with anxiety. Here was an opportunity to tell Bluestar what he had overheard last night. He caught up with her as she headed for the gorse tunnel and fell in step behind her. "Will your guards be joining us?" he asked hesitantly. Bluestar replied without looking back. "I've ordered Darkstripe and Longtail to help with the camp repairs. Securing ThunderClan's base is our first priority." Firepaw's heartbeat quickened. He would tell her about Ravenpaw as soon as they left camp. The two cats followed the trail to the training hollow. The path was strewn with freshly falling golden leaves that rustled beneath their paws. Firepaw's mind raced as he searched for suitable words. What should he tell his leader? That Tigerclaw was plotting to get rid of his apprentice. And what would he say when Bluestar asked him why? Could he bring himself to say out loud that he suspected Tigerclaw had killed Redtail, even though he had no evidence beyond Ravenpaw's excited storytelling at the gathering? By the time they reached the sandy hollow, Firepaw had still not spoken. The hollow was empty. "I asked Tigerclaw to hold his training session in another part of the forest today," Bluestar explained as she padded into the center of the hollow. "I want to concentrate on your fighting skills, and I want you to concentrate on them too, which means no distractions." "I must tell her now," thought Firepaw. "She needs to know about the danger Ravenpaw is in." His paws prickled with anxiety. "I won't have another chance like this." Sudden movement flashed in the corner of his eye. A swish of gray whirled past his nose, and Firepaw fell forward as his forepaws were knocked lightly from underneath him. He staggered, regained his balance, and spun around to see Bluestar sitting calmly beside him. "Do I have your attention now?" she growled. "Yes, Bluestar. Sorry," he replied hastily, looking into her blue eyes. "That's better. Firepaw, you have been with us for many moons now. I have watched you fight. With the rats, you were quick. With the Shadow Clan warriors, you were fierce. You outwitted Greypaw on that very first day we met, and you defeated Yellowfang with your cleverness too." She paused, then lowered her voice to an intense hiss. "But one day you will meet an opponent who is all of these things as well, quick and fierce and clever. It's my duty to prepare you for that day." Firepaw nodded, completely caught up in her words. His senses were fully alert. All thoughts of Ravenpaw and Tigerclaw had disappeared, and the musty odors and tiny noises of the forest rushed in upon him. "Let's see how you fight," Bluestar ordered. "Attack me." Firepaw looked at her, sizing her up and wondering the best way to begin. Bluestar was standing less than 3 rabbit lengths away. She was twice his size, so it would be a waste of effort to begin with the usual paw swipes and wrestling. But if he could leap straight onto her back with a powerful enough jump, he might be able to unbalance her. She hadn't taken her piercing blue eyes off of him for an instant. Firepaw stared back and leapt. He had aimed to land squarely on her shoulders, but Bluestar was ready for him. She dropped swiftly into a crouch. As Firepaw hit her, she rolled onto her back. Instead of landing on her shoulders, he found himself crashing down towards her upturned belly. She caught him with all four paws and flung him easily away from her. Firepaw felt he had been bundled away like a bothersome kit. He hit the dusty ground hard and lay winded for a moment before he scrambled to his feet. "Interesting strategy, but your eyes betrayed where you were aiming," growled Bluestar as she stood up and shook off the dust from her thick coat. "Now, try again." This time, Firepaw looked at her shoulders but aimed for her paws. When Bluestar dropped to the ground, he would hit her as she crouched. Firepaw felt a rush of satisfaction as he leapt, but it turned to confusion as Bluestar unexpectedly sprang into the air and let him crash into the ground where she had stood just a heartbeat before. She timed it perfectly. As he landed, she thundered down on top of him, squashing the breath out of him. "Now, try something I don't expect," she hissed into his ear, climbing off of him and backing away with a challenging gleam in her eyes. Firepaw scrambled up, panting, and shook himself crossly. Even Yellowfang had not been so tricky. He hissed and leapt again. This time, as he flew at Bluestar, he stretched out his forepaws. She reared up on her hind legs and used her forepaws to twist him away. As he felt himself slipping, Firepaw scrabbled with his hindpaws in the sand, but it was too late. He had flopped heavily onto his side. "Firepaw," Bluestar meowed calmly, as once more he struggled to his paws. "You're strong and quick, but you must learn to keep control of your speed and body weight so that it's not so easy for me to unbalance you. Try again." Firepaw backed away, hot, dusty, and out of breath. Frustration raged through him. He was determined to get the better of his mentor this time. Slowly he crouched and began to creep toward Bluestar. She mirrored his crouch and hissed into his face as he approached. He raised a paw and swiped at her left ear. She ducked to avoid his strike and reared up, towering over him. Quickly, Firepaw rolled onto his back, slithered beneath her body, and in one fast movement kicked both of her back legs upward into her belly. Bluestar was flung backwards and fell onto the sandy earth with a loud grunt. Firepaw flipped himself over and leapt to his paws. He felt jubilant. Then he saw Bluestar lying in the dirt and for the first time remembered her wounds. Had he reopened them? He dashed to her side and stared down at her. To his relief, her eyes glinted proudly back at him. "That was much better," she puffed. She stood and shook herself. "Now it's my turn." She sprang at him, knocking him to the ground, then retreated and let him pick himself up before leaping again. Firepaw braced himself, but she bowled him over easily again. "Look at my size, Firepaw. Don't try to stand up against my attack. Use your wits. If you are fast enough to avoid me, then avoid me." Firepaw scrambled to his feet again, preparing for her attack. This time he didn't dig his paws into the soft ground, but stood lightly, keeping his weight on his toes. But as Bluestar flew toward him, he hopped neatly out of her path, reared up on his hind legs, and with his forepaws pushed her flying body onward past him. Bluestar landed gracefully on all four paws and turned. "Excellent. You learned quickly," she purred. "But that isn't an easy move. Let's see how you deal with this one." They trained until sunset. Firepaw heaved a sigh of relief when he heard Bluestar meow. "That's enough for today." She seemed a little tired and stiff, but she still leapt easily out of the sandy hollow. Firepaw scrambled after her. His muscles were aching, and his head spinning with all he had learned. As they trekked together back through the trees, he couldn't wait to tell Greypaw and Ravenpaw about this training session. And it wasn't until they reached the camp boundary that Firepaw realized he'd forgotten to tell Bluestar about Ravenpaw. Chapter 20. By the time Firepaw returned, The camp was starting to look a little better. Parties of cats had clearly been patching and repairing continuously throughout the day. Frostfur and Goldenflower were still busy fortifying the nursery walls, but the outer wall looked solid and secure once more. Firepaw trotted across the clearing to see if there was any fresh kill around. He passed Sandpaw and Dustpaw, who were preparing to leave in the next patrol. "Sorry," mused Sandpaw, as Firepaw sniffed hopefully around the eating area. "We ate the last 2 mice." Firepaw shrugged. He would catch something for himself later. He headed back to the apprentice's den, where Greypaw was sitting with his back resting against the tree stump, licking a forepaw. "Where's Ravenpaw?" asked Firepaw as he sat down. "Not back from his task yet," replied Greypaw. "Look at that." He held out his paw for Firepaw to inspect. The pad was torn and bleeding. "Tigerclaw sent me fishing, and I stepped on a sharp stone in the stream. That looks pretty deep. You should get Spotted Leaf to take a look at it," Firepaw advised. "Where did Tigerclaw send Ravenpaw, by the way?" "Don't know. I was up to my belly in cold water," muttered Greypaw. He stood up and limped away toward Spotted Leaf's den. Firepaw settled down, his eyes fixed on the entrance to the camp, and waited for Ravenpaw. After overhearing the warriors' conversation last night, he couldn't shake the feeling that something dreadful was going to happen to his friend. His heart lurched as he saw Tigerclaw enter the camp alone. He waited longer. The moon was high in the sky. Surely Ravenpaw should be back by now. Firepaw found himself wishing he'd spoken to Bluestar when he'd had the chance. He could see Darkstripe and Longtail guarding her den now, and he certainly didn't want them to overhear his concerns. Tigerclaw had brought back fresh kill, which he was sharing with Whitestorm outside the warrior's den. Firepaw realized he was very hungry. Perhaps he should go and hunt. He might come across Ravenpaw outside the camp. As he wondered what to do, Firepaw saw Ravenpaw trotting through the entrance of the camp. A thrill of relief raced through him, and not just because Ravenpaw was holding fresh kill between his teeth. The apprentice came straight over to Firepaw and dropped the mouthful of food on the ground. "Enough for all 3 of us," he mewed proudly, "and it should taste extra good. It's from Shadow Clan territory." Firepaw gasped. "You hunted in Shadow Clan territory?" "That was my task," Ravenpaw explained. "Tigerclaw sent you into enemy territory to hunt." Firepaw could hardly believe it. "We must tell Bluestar. That was too dangerous." At the mention of Bluestar's name, Ravenpaw shook his head. His eyes looked hunted and shadowed with fear. "Look, just keep quiet, okay?" he hissed. "I survived. I even caught some prey. That's all there is to it." "You survived this time," Firepaw spat. "Shh. Tigerclaw's looking. Just eat your share and keep quiet," snapped Ravenpaw. Firepaw shrugged and took a piece of the fresh kill. Ravenpaw ate quickly, avoiding Firepaw's eyes. "Shall we save some for Greypaw?" he asked after a while. "He went to see Spotted Leaf," Firepaw mumbled through a mouthful. "He cut his paw. I don't know when he'll be back." "We'll save him whatever you want," replied Ravenpaw, suddenly sounding worn out. "I'm tired. I need to sleep." He stood up and pushed his way into the den. Firepaw stayed outside, watching the rest of the camp prepare for the night. He was going to have to tell Ravenpaw what he'd overheard in the forest last night. He needed to know just how much danger he was in. Tigerclaw was lying beside Whitestorm, sharing tongues, but with one eye fixed on the apprentice's den. Firepaw yawned to show Tigerclaw how exhausted he was. Then he got to his paws and followed Ravenpaw inside. Ravenpaw was asleep, but Firepaw could tell from his twitching paws and whiskers that he was dreaming. He knew it wasn't a good dream by the tiny mews and squeaks Ravenpaw was making. Suddenly the black cat leapt to his paws, his eyes stretched wide with horror. His fur was standing on end, and his back was arched. "Ravenpaw!" Firepaw meowed in alarm. "Calm down. You're in our den. There's only me here." Ravenpaw looked around wildly. "It's just me," Firepaw repeated. Ravenpaw blinked and seemed to recognize his friend. He collapsed onto his bed. "Ravenpaw," mewed Firepaw seriously, "there's something you need to know. Something I heard last night when I was out looking for the wild garlic." Ravenpaw looked away, still trembling from his dream, but Firepaw persisted. Ravenpaw, I heard Tigerclaw telling Darkstripe and Longtail that you betrayed ThunderClan. He told them that you slipped away during the trip to Mother Mouth, and told ShadowClan that the camp was unguarded. Ravenpaw spun round to face Firepaw. But I didn't, he exclaimed, horrified. Of course you didn't, Firepaw agreed, but Darkstripe and Longtail believe you did, and Tigerclaw persuaded them that they should get rid of you. Ravenpaw was speechless, his breath coming in gasps. Why would Tigerclaw want to get rid of you, Ravenpaw? Firepaw asked gently. He's one of the clan's strongest warriors. What threat are you to him? Firepaw suspected he already knew the answer, but he wanted to hear the truth from Ravenpaw's own mouth. He waited while Ravenpaw fumbled for words. At last the Black Apprentice crawled closer to Firepaw and whispered hoarsely into his ears. Because the River Clan deputy didn't kill Redtail, Tigerclaw did. Firepaw nodded silently, and Ravenpaw continued, his whisper cracking with tension. Redtail killed the River Clan deputy. So Tigerclaw didn't kill Oakheart, Firepaw couldn't help interrupting. Ravenpaw shook his head. No, he didn't. After Redtail had killed Oakheart, Tigerclaw ordered me back to camp. I wanted to stay, but he yelled at me to go, so I ran into the trees. I should have carried on running, but I couldn't leave while they were still fighting. I turned and crept back to see if Tigerclaw needed help. By the time I got near, all the River Clan warriors had fled, leaving just Redtail and Tigerclaw. Redtail was watching the last warrior running away, and Tigerclaw... Ravenpaw paused, then gulped. Tigerclaw jumped on him. He sank his teeth into the back of his neck, and Redtail fell to the ground. That's when I ran. I don't know if Tigerclaw saw me or not. I just kept running till I got back to the camp. Why didn't you tell Bluestar? Firepaw pressed gently. Would she have believed me? Ravenpaw's eyes rolled wildly. Do you believe me? Of course I do, Firepaw mewed. He licked Ravenpaw between the ears in an effort to calm and comfort his friend. He was going to have to find another opportunity to tell Bluestar about Tigerclaw's treachery. Don't worry, I'll sort it out, he promised. Meanwhile, make sure you stick close to me or Greypaw. Does Greypaw know about them wanting to get rid of me? Not yet, but I'll have to tell him. Ravenpaw settled silently onto his belly and stared ahead. It's okay, Ravenpaw, Firepaw purred, touching the skinny black body with his nose. I'll help you get out of this. Greypaw padded into the den at dawn. Sandpaw and Dustpaw had returned from their patrol a while ago and were asleep in their nests. Hi, mewed Greypaw, sounding more cheerful than he had for days. Firepaw woke at once. You sound better, he purred. Greypaw licked Firepaw's ear. Spotted Leaf put some gunk on my cut and made me lie still for hours. I must have fallen asleep. By the way, I hope that chaffinch out there was for me. I was starving. It was. Ravenpaw caught it yesterday. Tigerclaw sent him into Shut up, you two, growled Sandpaw, for some of us are trying to sleep. Greypaw rolled his eyes. Come on, Firepaw, he mewed. Brindleface has had her kits. Let's go and visit them. Firepaw purred with pleasure. At last something for ThunderClan to celebrate. He looked down at Ravenpaw, who was still sleeping, and padded out of the den. With Greypaw, he trotted across the clearing toward the nursery. The rising sun made his pelt glow with warmth, and he stretched appreciatively, revealing it to the suppleness of his spine and the strength in his legs. Stop showing off, Greypaw called over his shoulder. Firepaw stood stretching and bounded after his friend. White Storm was sitting outside the nursery, guarding the entrance. Have you two come to see the new kits? He meowed. As Firepaw and Greypaw approached, Firepaw nodded. One at a time only, and you'll have to wait. Bluestar's with her now. White Storm told them. Well, you can go first, Firepaw offered. I'll go and see Yellowfang while I'm waiting. He dipped his head respectfully to White Storm and headed off toward Yellowfang's nest. The old cat was washing behind her ears, her eyes half closed with concentration. Don't tell me you're expecting rain, Firepaw teased. Yellowfang looked up. You've been listening to too many elders' tales, she meowed. What would be the point of a cat washing its ears if they're only going to get rained on anyway? Firepaw's whiskers twitched with amusement. Are you going to see Brindleface's new litter? He asked. Yellowfang stiffened and she shook her head. I don't think I'd be very welcomed, she growled. But they know you saved, Firepaw began. A she-cat is very protective of her newborns, especially when it's her first litter. I think I'll stay away, Yellowfang replied in a tone that invited no argument. As you wish, but I'm going to see them. It must be a good sign having new kits in the camp. Yellowfang shrugged. Sometimes, she muttered darkly. Firepaw turned and trotted back to the nursery. Clouds had covered the sun, making the air turn fresher. A fierce breeze tugged at his fur and rustled the leaves around the clearing. Bluestar was sitting outside the nursery. Behind her, Greypaw's tail was just disappearing into the narrow entrance. Firepaw, she greeted him. Have you come to see ThunderClan's newest warriors? The ThunderClan leader sounded tired and sad. Firepaw was surprised. Surely the kits were good news for ThunderClan. Yes, I have, he replied. Well, when you've finished, come and see me in my den. Yes, Bluestar, Firepaw mewed as she walked slowly away. He felt his fur prickle. Here was another chance to speak to Bluestar alone. Perhaps StarClan was on his side after all. Greypaw crawled out of the nursery entrance. They're really cute, he mewed, but I'm starving now. I'm off to find some fresh kill. I'll save some for you if I find any. He blinked affectionately at Firepaw and bounded away. Firepaw purred a goodbye and looked up at Whitestorm, who nodded his permission for him to enter the nursery. Firepaw squeezed through the tiny entrance. 4 tiny kits huddled warmly in Brindleface's deeply lined nest. Their fur was pale gray with darker flecks, just like their mother, except for one tiny dark gray tom. They mewled and squirmed beside Brindleface's belly, their eyes shut tight. How are you feeling? Greypaw whispered to her. A little tired, answered Brindleface. She looked down proudly at her litter. But the kits are all strong and healthy. ThunderClan is lucky to have them. Firepaw purred. I was just talking about them to Yellowfang. Brindleface didn't answer, and Firepaw couldn't miss the look of worry that flashed in her eyes as she nudged a straying kit closer to her. Firepaw felt a tremor of anxiety in his belly. Bluestar may have accepted Yellowfang into ThunderClan, but it looked like the old cat was still not trusted by all of the clan. He touched his nose affectionately to Brindleface's flank, then turned and made his way out into the clearing. The clan leader was waiting for Firepaw at the entrance to her den. Longtail sat at her side. The pale tabby warrior stared hard at Firepaw as he approached. Firepaw ignored his gaze and looked expectantly at Bluestar. Come inside, she meowed, turning to lead the way. Firepaw trotted after her. Longtail immediately stood up as if to follow them. Bluestar looked back at him over her shoulder. I think I'll be safe enough with young Firepaw, she meowed. Longtail looked uncertain for a moment, then sat down again outside the entrance. Firepaw had never been inside Bluestar's den. He padded after her through the lichen that draped its entrance. Brindleface's kits are lovely, he purred. Bluestar looked serious. Lovely they may be, but they mean more mouths to feed, and the season of leaf bear will soon be here. Then she glanced at Firepaw, who was unable to hide his surprise at her melancholy tone. Oh, don't listen to me, meowed Bluestar, shaking her head impatiently. The first cold wind always worries me. Come, make yourself comfortable. She tipped her head toward the dry, sandy floor. Firepaw dropped onto his belly and stretched his paws out in front of him. Bluestar circled slowly on her mossy nest. I'm still aching from our training session yesterday, she admitted when she had finally settled herself and curled her tail around her paws. You fought well, young one. For once, Firepaw didn't stop to bask in her praise. His heart was thumping. This was the perfect moment to tell his leader his fears about Tigerclaw. He lifted his chin, ready to speak. But it was Bluestar who spoke first, staring past him at the far wall of her den. I can still smell the stale stench of ShadowClan in the camp, she murmured. I hoped never to see the day when our enemy broke into the heart of ThunderClan. Firepaw nodded in silent agreement, sensing Bluestar was going to say more. And so many deaths, she sighed. First Redtail, then Lionheart. I think StarClan, at least the warriors we have left are strong and loyal like them. At least with Tigerclaw's deputy, ThunderClan may still be able to defend itself. Firepaw's heart plummeted, and an icy chill cut deep into him as Bluestar went on. There was a time when Tigerclaw was a young warrior that I feared for the strength of his passion. Such energy can need careful channeling, but now I am proud to see how much respect the clan has for him. I know he is ambitious, but his ambition makes him one of the bravest cats I have ever had the honor to fight alongside. Firepaw knew at once that he could not tell Bluestar his suspicion about Tigerclaw. Not when Bluestar looked to her deputy to protect the whole clan. He would have to save Ravenpaw himself. He took a deep breath and blinked slowly so that when Bluestar turned and looked directly into his eyes, no trace of his shock and disappointment remained. Her next words were quiet and full of concern. You know Broken Star will return. He made it clear at the gathering that he wants hunting rights in all the territories. We fought him off once, we can do it again, Firepaw insisted. That's true, Bluestar acknowledged with a wry nod. StarClan will honor your courage, young Firepaw. She paused and licked a healing wound on her side. I think you ought to know that. In the battle with the rats, it was not my 5th life that I lost, but my 7th. Firepaw sat bolt upright, shocked. Bluestar went on. I have let the clan believe it was my 5th, because I don't want them to fear for my safety. But 2 more lives, and I will have to leave you to join StarClan. Firepaw's mind was racing. Why was she telling him this? Thank you for sharing this with me, Bluestar. He purred respectfully. Bluestar nodded. I'm tired now, she rasped. Off you go. And Firepaw, I don't expect you to repeat this conversation to anyone. Of course, Bluestar, Firepaw replied as he nosed his way out through the curtain of lichen. Longtail was still sitting by the entrance. Firepaw stepped past him and made his way towards his den. He didn't know which part of his conversation with Bluestar had been more bewildering. He was stopped in his tracks by a yell of horror coming from the nursery. Frostfur came sprinting into the clearing, her tail bristling and her eyes wide with alarm. My kits! Someone has taken my kits! Tigerclaw bounded over to her. He called to the clan. Quick, search the camp. White Storm, stay where you are. Warriors, patrol the camp boundary. Apprentices, search every den. Firepaw rushed to the nearest den, the warriors, and pushed his way inside. It was empty. He scrabbled through the bedding with his paws, but there was neither sight nor scent of Frostfur's kits. He charged outside and headed for his own den. Ravenpaw and Greypaw were already inside, pushing aside their nests, sniffing every corner. Dustpaw and Sandpaw were searching the elder's den. Firepaw left them to it and charged from one clump of grass to another, pushing his muzzle into them, ignoring the nettles that stung his nose. There was no sign of the kits anywhere. He looked around the camp boundary. Warriors paced backward and forward, urgently sniffing the air. Suddenly, Firepaw spotted Yellowfang in the distance. She was pushing her way through an unguarded part of the fern wall. She must have found a scent, he thought, and raced towards her, as her tail disappeared into the greenery. By the time he arrived at the fern wall, she had gone. He sniffed the air. No kit scent, just the bitter smell of Yellowfang's fear. What was she afraid of? Firepaw wondered. Tigerclaw's yowl sounded from the bushes behind the nursery. All the cats raced over to him, headed by Frostfur. They were crowded as closely as they could, jostling to see through the dense undergrowth. Firepaw nosed his way forward and saw Tigerclaw standing over a motionless bundle of dappled fur. Spotted Leaf. Firepaw stared in disbelief at her lifeless body. Fury rose in him like a dark cloud, and he felt the blood roaring in his ears. Who had done this? Bluestar stepped through the crowd and leaned over the medicine cat. She's been killed by a warrior blow, she meowed softly. Firepaw craned his neck and saw a single wound on the back of Spotted Leaf's neck. His head swam, and suddenly he was unable to see clearly. Through his grief, Firepaw heard a murmur at the back of the crowd that swelled into a single piercing yowl. Yellowfang is gone. Chapter 21. Yellowfang has killed Spotted Leaf and taken my kits, screeched Frostfur. The other queens rushed to Frostfur's side and tried to calm her with licks and caresses, but Frostfur pushed them away and wailed her grief to the darkening sky. As if in reply, the sky rumbled ominously, a cold wind ruffled to the cat's fur. Yellowfang hissed to Tigerclaw, I always knew she was a traitor. Now we know how she managed to fight off the Shadow Clan deputy. It was a setup to let her trick her way into our clan. Lightning cracked overhead, punctuating Tigerclaw's words with a glaring white flash, and a clap of thunder rolled around the woods. Firepaw couldn't believe what he was hearing. Dazed with grief, his mind whirled. Could Yellowfang really have killed Spotted Leaf? Above the shocked murmurs, Darkstripe meowed loudly. Bluestar, what do you say? The cats fell silent as they turned to look at their leader. Bluestar's gaze moved across the crowd of cats and settled finally on Spotted Leaf's body. The first drops of rain began to fall, sparkling like dewdrops on the medicine cat's still glossy fur. Bluestar blinked slowly. Grief clouded her face, and for a moment, Firepaw was afraid that this new death would overwhelm her. But when her eyes opened, they glittered with a fierceness that showed her determination to seek revenge for this cruel attack. She lifted her head. If Yellowfang has killed Spotted Leaf and stolen Frostfur's kits, she will be hunted down without mercy. The crowd meowed approvingly. But we must wait. Bluestar went on. There is a storm coming, and I am not prepared to risk more lives. If Shadow Clan has our kits, they will come to no immediate harm. I suspect Broken Star wants them as recruits for his own clan, or as hostages, to force us to let him hunt in our territory. As soon as the storm has passed, a patrol will follow Yellowfang and bring back our kits. We cannot waste time, or the scent will be lost in the rain, Tigerclaw protested. Bluestar flicked her tail impatiently. If we send out a hunting party now, our efforts will be wasted anyway. In this weather, the scent will already be lost by the time we are ready. If we wait until after the storm, we stand a better chance of success. There were murmurs of agreement among the clan. Even though it was barely sun-high, the sky was growing much darker. The cats were unsettled by this lightning and thunder, and seemed willing to listen to their leader's advice. Bluestar looked at her deputy. I'd like to discuss our plans with you, please, Tigerclaw. Tigerclaw nodded and stalked away towards Bluestar's den, but the leader hesitated. She glanced at Firepaw, signaling with a flick of her tail and a ripple of her whiskers that she wanted to speak to him alone. The other cats gathered around Spotted Leaf and began to share tongues with her, their wails of grief sounding above the thunder. Bluestar wound her way through them and went toward the fern tunnel that led to Spotted Leaf's den. Firepaw quietly skirted the mourning cats and followed her inside. It was very dark beneath the ferns. The storm had blotted out the morning sun, so that it seemed as if the night had fallen. Rain was falling more heavily now, spattering noisily against the leaves, but at least it was sheltered in Spotted Leaf's clearing. Firepaw, Bluestar meowed urgently as he arrived at her side. Where is Yellowfang, do you know? Firepaw hardly heard her. He couldn't help remembering the last time he had come to this clearing. An image of Spotted Leaf trotting out of her den with her coat gleaming in the sunlight burned in his mind, and he closed his eyes to observe it. Firepaw, snapped Bluestar, you must save your grieving for later. Firepaw shook himself. I saw Yellowfang go through the camp boundary after the kits went missing. Do you really think she killed Spotted Leaf and took the kits? Bluestar gazed steadily at him. I don't know, she admitted. I want you to find her and bring her back alive. I need to know the truth. You're not sending Tigerclaw? Firepaw couldn't help asking. Tigerclaw is a great warrior, but in this case his loyalty to the clan may cloud his judgment. Bluestar explained. He wants to give the clan the vengeance it desires. No cat can blame him for that. The clan believes Yellowfang has betrayed us, and if Tigerclaw thinks he can reassure the clan by handing them a dead body, that's what he will do. Firepaw nodded. She was right. Tigerclaw would kill Yellowfang without question. Bluestar looked stern for a moment. "If I find that Yellowfang is a traitor, then I will kill her myself. But if she is not," her blue eyes burned into Firepaws, "I will not let an innocent cat die." "But what if Yellowfang won't come back?" Firepaw meowed. "She will, if you ask her." Firepaw felt stunned by Bluestar's faith in him. The enormity of what she was asking him to do weighed down on him, and he wondered if he had enough courage to carry it through. "Go at once," she ordered, "but be careful. You will be on your own, and there may be enemy patrols about. This storm will keep our own warriors in camp for a while." Thunder rolled overhead as Firepaw dashed out into the clearing. Rain hammered down, pelting against his fur like tiny stones. A bolt of lightning lit up the faces of Darkstripe and Longtail as they watched him cross the clearing. Firepaw bounded past the nursery. He couldn't leave without sharing tongues with Spotted Leaf. The other cats had run for shelter, abandoning the medicine cat's body to the downpour while they huddled beneath the dripping ferns, meowing their fear and loss. Firepaw buried his nose in Spotted Leaf's wet fur and breathed in her scent one last time. "Goodbye, my sweet Spotted Leaf," he murmured. His ears pricked as he overheard the voices of Frostfur and Speckletail talking nearby. He froze, straining to listen. "Yellowfang must have had help," Speckletail growled. "Someone from ThunderClan?" came the anxious voice of Frostfur. "You've heard what Tigerclaw's been saying about Ravenpaw. Perhaps he has something to do with it. I've never felt comfortable with him myself." The fur on Firepaw's spine prickled. If Tigerclaw had been spreading his malicious rumors as far as the nursery, Ravenpaw wouldn't be safe anywhere in the camp. Firepaw realized he had to act quickly. He would find Yellowfang first, then deal with Ravenpaw. He raced to the spot where he had last seen Yellowfang. He knew her scent so well that he could even smell it through the rain-soaked leaves. He began to push through the bushes, mouth open, to detect where her trail led. "Firepaw!" Firepaw jumped and then relaxed as he realized it was Greypaw's voice. "I've been looking for you," mewed his friend as he rushed towards him. Firepaw gingerly stepped back out of the ferns. Greypaw squinted as the rain dripped down his long fur and into his eyes. "Where are you going?" "Mewed. "To look for Yellowfang," Firepaw replied. "On your own?" Greypaw's broad gray face showed concern. Firepaw thought for a moment and decided to tell Greypaw the truth. "Bluestar asked me to bring Yellowfang back," he meowed. "What?" Greypaw looked shocked. "Why you?" "Maybe she thinks I know Yellowfang best, and that I'd find her more easily." "Wouldn't a party of warriors stand more of a chance?" Greypaw pointed out. "Tigerclaw's the best tracker in the clan, and if anyone could bring her back, he could." "Maybe Tigerclaw wouldn't bring her back," Firepaw murmured. "What do you mean? Tigerclaw's out for revenge. He would just kill her." "But if she killed Spotted Leaf and took the kits, do you really believe that?" Firepaw asked. Greypaw looked at his friend, shaking his head in confusion. "Do you think she's innocent?" he mewed. "I don't know," Firepaw admitted, "and neither does Bluestar. She wants to find out the truth. That's why she's sending me instead of Tigerclaw. But if she ordered Tigerclaw to bring her back alive..." Greypaw's words were drowned by a deafening crack of thunder, and a flash of lightning lit up the trees around them. In the dazzling light, Firepaw glimpsed Frostfur chasing Ravenpaw away from the nursery. The White Queen's face was twisted with fury as she hissed at the young black cat and lunged forward to give him a warning nip on the hind leg. Greypaw turned to Firepaw. "What's that about?" he mewed. Firepaw stared back at his friend, his mind leaping ahead to a new idea. It looked like Ravenpaw's time had run out, and Firepaw needed Greypaw's help. But would his friend believe him? The wind was beginning to roar through the trees above them, and Firepaw had to raise his voice. "Ravenpaw's in great danger," he meowed. "What?" "I have to get him out from ThunderClan right now before anything happens to him." Greypaw looked puzzled. "Why? What about Yellowfang? There's no time to explain." Firepaw mewed urgently. "You'll just have to trust me. There must be a way we can get Ravenpaw away. Bluestar's going to keep the warriors in camp till the storm is over, but that doesn't leave us much time." He tried to picture the hidden corners of the woods beyond ThunderClan territory. "We'll have to take him somewhere Tigerclaw won't find him, and somewhere he can survive without the clan." Greypaw stared at him for a moment. "What about Barley?" "Barley!" Firepaw echoed. You mean take Ravenpaw to the two-leg place? His ears twitched with excitement. Yes, that might be the best idea. Come on, then, meowed Greypaw. What are we waiting for? Relief washed over Firepaw. He should have known his old friend would help. He shook the rein from his head, then touched Greypaw's fur with his nose. Thank you, he purred. Now let's get Ravenpaw. They found their friend huddled miserably inside their den. Sandpaw and Dustpaw were in their nests, too, looking tense and scared as the storm crashed overhead. Ravenpaw, Firepaw hissed through the entrance. Ravenpaw looked up. Firepaw flicked his ears, and the black cat followed him out into the storm. Come on, Firepaw whispered. We're taking you to Barley. Barley? Ravenpaw mewed in bewilderment, narrowing his eyes against the driving rain. Why? Because you'll be safe there, Firepaw answered, looking the black cat straight in the eye. Did you see what Frostfur did? Mewed Ravenpaw, his voice quavering. I was only going to check on the kits. Come on, Firepaw interrupted. We must hurry. Ravenpaw met his friend's gaze. Thanks, Firepaw, he murmured. Then he turned into the wind and bounded across the clearing. The three apprentices rushed toward the camp entrance, their fur flattened by the howling wind. As they entered the gorse tunnel, a voice called them back. You three, where are you going? It was Tigerclaw. Firepaw whirled around, feeling his heart sink. He wondered desperately what he could say when he spotted Bluestar striding toward him. She frowned for a moment, then her face cleared. Well done, Firepaw, she meowed. I see you've persuaded your two friends to go with you. ThunderClan has brave apprentices, Tigerclaw, if they are willing to run an errand in the weather like this. Surely this is not a time for errands, objected Tigerclaw. One of Brindleface's kits has a cough. Bluestar's voice was icily calm. Firepaw has offered to fetch some colt's foot for her. Does he really need his friends to go too? Asked Tigerclaw. In this storm? I think he is lucky to have the company, answered Bluestar. She looked deep into Firepaw's eyes, and he was suddenly aware of the trust she was placing in him. Off you go, you three, she meowed. Firepaw returned her gaze gratefully. Thank you, he purred, dipping his head. With a swift glance at his companions, he led the way along the familiar path towards 4 trees. The wind roared through the branches above them, and the trees swayed, their trunks creaking and cracking as though they might fall at any moment. The rain poured down through the leaves, soaking the cats to their hides. They reached the stream, but the stepping stones they usually leapt across had completely disappeared. The cat stopped on the bank and looked down in dismay at the wide, brown, swirling river. This way, Firepaw meowed. There's a fallen tree up here. We can use it to cross. He led Greypaw and Ravenpaw upstream to a log that rested only a kitten step above the rushing water. Be careful, it'll be slippery, Firepaw warned, leaping carefully up onto it. The log's bark had been stripped away, leaving only smooth, wet wood to balance on. Carefully, the 3 cats walked along the trunk. Firepaw jumped down on the other side and watched his friends until they, too, had landed safely. The trees were bigger on the other side, offering some shelter from the storm as they hurried on side by side. Are you going to tell me exactly why we need to get Ravenpaw away? Panted Greypaw. Because he knows that Tigerclaw killed Redtail, Firepaw answered. Tigerclaw killed Redtail, Greypaw echoed in disbelief, stopping dead and staring first at Firepaw and then at Ravenpaw. At the battle with RiverClan, puffed Ravenpaw. I saw him. But why would he do that? Greypaw protested, setting off again. He started down the slope that led into the clearing at 4 trees. I don't know. Maybe he thought Bluestar would make him deputy, Firepaw suggested, raising his voice against the wind. Greypaw didn't reply, but his face darkened. The cats began to climb the steep slope that led up to WindClan territory. As Firepaw leapt upward from rock to rock, he called down to Greypaw behind him. He wanted his friend to understand just how dangerous it was for Ravenpaw in the ThunderClan camp. I overheard Tigerclaw talking to Darkstripe and Longtail on the night Lionheart was killed. He yelled. He wants to get rid of Ravenpaw. Get rid of him? You mean kill him? Greypaw sat heavily on a rock. Firepaw stopped too. He looked down at his friend. Ravenpaw had halted farther down the slope, his sides heaving as he caught his breath. He looked smaller than ever, with his sodden fur clinging to his scrawny body. You saw the way Frostburn went for Ravenpaw today. Firepaw meowed to Greypaw. Tigerclaw's been hinting to everyone that Ravenpaw is a traitor, but he'll be safe with Barley. Now come on, we must hurry. It was impossible to talk in the open expanse of WindClan territory. The wind howled around them while the thunder and lightning rolled and flashed overhead. The three cats lowered their heads and pushed onward into the heart of the storm. Eventually they reached the edge of the plateau that marked the end of WindClan territory. We can't take you any farther, Ravenpaw, meowed Firepaw through the gale. We have to get back and find Yellowfang before the storm has passed. Ravenpaw looked up through the battering rain, alarmed. Then he nodded. Will you be able to find Barley alone? Yelled Firepaw. Yeah, I remember the way, answered Ravenpaw. Watch out for those dogs, warned Greypaw. Ravenpaw nodded. I will. Suddenly he frowned. How can you be sure Barley will welcome me? Just tell him you caught an adder once, answered Greypaw, affectionately nudging his friend's rain-soaked shoulder. Go, Firepaw urged, aware that time was short. He licked Ravenpaw's skinny chest. And don't worry. I'll make sure everyone knows you didn't betray ThunderClan. What if Tigerclaw comes looking for me? Ravenpaw's voice was small against the rumbling storm. Firepaw met his gaze steadily. He won't. I'll tell them all you're dead. And that's where we'll stop for tonight. I hope everyone has enjoyed listening, and I hope you all have a good evening and a good night. So, till next time, my friends.